The courtroom buzzed with a low murmur of tension as people filed into the gallery. The case on the docket that morning was already the center of controversy, a police brutality trial involving Officer Bradley Kane, a man known in certain communities for his aggressive tactics and racially charged confrontations. Though his misconduct had been whispered about in the past, nothing had ever stuck until now. A young Latino man had been hospitalized during a traffic stop, and for once, there was body cam footage, witness testimony, and undeniable public outcry. The room was filled with activists, journalists, and community members waiting to see if justice would finally be served. Officer Kane sat stiffly at the defendant's table, his jaw clenched, arms crossed tightly over his chest. His eyes scanned the room, sizing up everyone with visible contempt, especially anyone who wasn't white. He had expected support from fellow officers, but the scandal had been too public for them to stand beside him this time. A few colleagues sat in the back, stone-faced, more out of obligation than loyalty. At the same time, the courtroom door creaked open again, and in walked a well-dressed black woman carrying a slim folder. She moved with grace, confidence, and an unshakable calm. Her name was Dr. Aisha Monroe. She wore no police badge, carried no air of authority, and made no attempt to draw attention to herself. Most assumed she was a lawyer, perhaps observing for legal oversight. Few knew exactly who she was except the judge, who gave her a respectful nod, and a few attorneys who exchanged surprised glances. Officer Kane, however, didn't recognize her and didn't care to learn who she was. He sneered at her as she passed by, muttering loud enough for his defense attorney to hear, "Of course. Just what we need, another woke protester with a clipboard." His lawyer gave him a nervous nudge, signaling him to be quiet, but Kane had never known when to shut up. Aisha sat in the front row of the gallery, her eyes locked not on Kane but on the judge and the documents in her folder. She was here for observation and justice, not attention. Still, her presence made Kane uneasy. Something about her composure irritated him, like she knew more than he did, like she belonged here more than he ever would. His paranoia and deeply rooted prejudice told him she was probably one of those civil rights watchdogs. The trial commenced, and testimonies began. The room grew more tense as footage of Kane's violent arrest played for the court. Gasps came from the gallery, and jurors shifted in discomfort. Kane watched it all unfold with a visible scowl, his mood worsening by the minute. He felt exposed, attacked, and more importantly outnumbered. Then he looked back at the woman again. She was still calm, unmoved, not afraid of him, not giving him the satisfaction of a reaction. He didn't know it yet, but that woman, quiet, dignified, and observant, was about to become the catalyst that would unravel the illusion of untouchability he'd hidden behind his entire career. What began as just another hearing would soon erupt into a public reckoning, and he had no idea who he had just messed with. Court was on a short recess, and people filtered out into the hallway for a break. The atmosphere remained heavy. No one could unsee the brutal footage that had just been played inside. Conversations were hushed, reactions mixed with disbelief and quiet anger. Yet amidst it all, Dr. Aisha Monroe remained composed. She had stepped into the hallway and was quietly reviewing her notes, standing near a wall away from the crowd. Her presence radiated professionalism and poise. Officer Bradley Kane, however, was steaming. The footage shown in court had embarrassed him. The murmurs in the crowd, the looks of disgust from the jury, the clear shift in tone from the judge, it all boiled inside him. In his mind, he wasn't the one on trial. He was the victim of a soft system overrun by political correctness. He blamed the media, the judge, the witnesses, and now the elegant black woman who dared to sit in the front row like she had some authority over him. As Kane exited the courtroom, His eyes locked on Aisha. He didn't know her name, but something about her presence infuriated him. He saw her confidence as arrogance. In his warped view, she was an outsider who didn't belong. Driven by wounded ego and deep-seated racism, Kane crossed the hallway toward her with heavy, angry steps. "You think this is a joke?" he barked, stopping just a few feet from her. "You people show up with your clipboards and smug looks like you own the damn place." Aisha didn't flinch. She looked up from her folder, meeting his eyes calmly. "Officer Kane," she said, voice firm but even. "I suggest you walk away." Her tone wasn't loud. It wasn't threatening, but it carried power, and that only infuriated him more. The fact that she wasn't intimidated made him feel small. "You threatening me?" he snapped, stepping closer. "Who do you even think you are? Some activist spy?" Courts for real people, not race hustlers. A nearby court officer turned their head, noticing the raised voice. People began to glance over. A few lifted phones, unsure if what was about to happen might need recording. "I said walk away," Aisha repeated, not moving an inch. "You're on duty. Don't forget that." Kane lost control. In a sudden motion, he grabbed her by the arm, not with restraint, but with force. "You don't get to tell me what to do," he shouted, jerking her slightly off balance. Before Aisha could respond, a sharp gasp rang out. One of the bystanders had started recording just in time. Another yelled, "Hey, get your hands off her." A court bailiff ran over, pushing between them and shouting, "Officer, step back now." Kane tried to explain, his voice panicked and angry at once. She started it, but no one was buying it. Aisha stood tall, smoothing her jacket, her calm returning even as the hall swirled in chaos. Within seconds, word had reached the courtroom. The judge ordered an emergency hearing. More officers arrived, and Kane was escorted away for questioning. And still, he didn't know who she was, but he would very soon. The emergency hearing was called just 30 minutes after the hallway altercation. The courtroom, already tense from earlier testimonies, was now crackling with anticipation. The gallery filled faster than before. Word had spread like wildfire that Officer Bradley Kane had physically assaulted a black woman during the recess. Social media was flooded with a short video clip of the incident recorded by a bystander. In it, Kane could be seen grabbing the woman's arm aggressively, shouting angrily as she stood her ground. As murmurs spread and phones buzzed, Officer Kane sat back at the defense table, looking pale. For the first time, there was visible fear in his eyes. His defense attorney sat beside him, whispering rapidly. Kane barely heard him. His mind was spinning. He still didn't know who the woman was, only that she hadn't backed down, and now the entire courtroom was turning against him. The judge entered, face stern, and called the session to order. "This court has been informed of a serious incident involving the defendant during recess. Before we proceed further, we must establish the facts." At that moment, the double courtroom doors opened. Every head turned. Walking in, tall, composed, and dressed in a dark blue uniform with polished insignia on his chest, was none other than Police Chief Malcolm Monroe. The room fell silent in shock. His presence alone carried gravity, but what came next stunned everyone. He wasn't walking alone. By his side, arm gently tucked into his, was the woman from the hallway, Dr. Aisha Monroe. Officer Kane's face went slack. His eyes darted between the two, disbelief contorting into horror. He had assaulted a black woman in public, and that woman was the wife of the city's top cop. The judge looked visibly startled, though he quickly regained composure. "Chief Monroe, thank you for your presence. Would you like to address the court?" Malcolm Monroe nodded, stepping forward with quiet strength. Yes, Your Honor. I am here not as a superior officer to the defendant, but as the husband of the woman who was physically assaulted in this courthouse. Her name is Dr. Aisha Monroe. She is a licensed civil rights attorney and a court-appointed observer in this case, approved by your office last week. The room broke into hushed gasps. Aisha, still calm, gave a respectful nod toward the judge, then faced Kane briefly, her eyes saying more than any words could. Chief Monroe continued, his voice measured but charged. I ask this court to treat this incident not with bias nor deference, but with the full force of the law. No man, badge or not, has the right to lay a hand on my wife or on any woman in or out of uniform. Kane slumped in his seat, his defenses crumbling in real time. No one moved to support him. The few officers who had once sat in solidarity behind him now looked away, ashamed or silent. The judge nodded slowly. Thank you, Chief. We will now proceed to hear formal testimony on this incident. In a matter of minutes, the power dynamic had shifted entirely. Kane's sense of dominance had collapsed. Aisha wasn't just a bystander, she was an educated, respected legal observer, married to the highest-ranking officer in the city. And now, everyone knew. The fallout was immediate, intense, and unlike anything the city had seen in years. Within hours of the courtroom confrontation, the video of Officer Kane grabbing Dr. Aisha Monroe had gone viral. The footage, just 30 seconds long, captured not only the physical aggression but also the disturbing tone of his voice, the rage, the entitlement, the complete lack of control. The caption spreading on social media read, "Racist cop attacks black woman in court. Didn't know. She's the police chief's wife." By the end of the day, the clip had been viewed over 2 million times. News outlets across the country picked up the story. Local reporters camped outside the courthouse. Protesters gathered by the hundreds, holding signs that read "Justice for Aisha," "Protect Black Women," and "Hold Cops Accountable." Some chanted for Officer Kane's arrest. Others called for a full review of police conduct within the city. Inside City Hall, pressure mounted. The mayor, caught between political loyalty and public outrage, held a press conference late that evening. With solemn eyes and a tightened jaw, she stated, "We are deeply disturbed by the footage involving Officer Kane. No one is above the law. The incident is under investigation, and we will ensure justice is served." Meanwhile, Chief Malcolm Monroe remained composed but firm. His earlier statement in court had already made headlines, but now he faced a new wave of questions. How would he handle discipline within his own department? Would he recuse himself from the investigation due to personal ties? Was Kane just one bad apple or a symptom of a larger issue? Chief Monroe didn't shy away. In a televised address, he stood beside his wife and said, "I am not only Issa's husband. I am also the man responsible for ensuring public trust in our police force. What happened in that hallway wasn't just a personal offense. It was a professional disgrace, and it will not go unanswered." His speech sent shockwaves through the department. Internal Affairs launched an immediate investigation into Officer Kane's history, which revealed a disturbing pattern. At least 6 prior complaints for aggressive conduct against black and brown civilians, none of which ever resulted in formal discipline. A new task force was formed to reopen those cases. Public sentiment continued to swell. Community leaders held forums and town halls demanding structural reform. Activists who had long called out Kane's behavior were finally being heard. For them, the incident wasn't shocking, it was validation. It proved what they had known all along. Officer Kane was dangerous, protected by silence and systemic neglect. Amidst all this, Dr. Aisha Monroe remained strikingly quiet. She declined interviews and stayed out of the media frenzy. Her silence, however, spoke volumes. Her calm during the assault, her refusal to escalate, and her powerful presence in court became symbols of quiet resistance and dignity. The city had been shaken but not broken. The veil of invincibility around corrupt officers had been pierced, and in its place was a growing demand for accountability. Bradley Kane wasn't just facing public shame now, he was facing justice. The courtroom was packed. Journalists lined the back wall, sketch artists captured every expression, and community members, many of whom had never attended a court hearing before, filled every seat. This wasn't just a trial anymore. It had become a moment of reckoning, not only for Officer Bradley Kane, but for a system that had too often protected people like him. Kane now stood not as a police officer, but as a defendant in a case that combined multiple charges: assault, abuse of power, and professional misconduct. His legal team looked weary, knowing the uphill battle they faced. The evidence was damning. The video clip from the hallway played once again for the court, this time as part of official testimony. It showed Kane grabbing Dr. Aisha Monroe's arm and shouting aggressively, with bystanders reacting in horror. The courtroom was silent as the footage replayed again and again, but that wasn't all. The prosecution had filed a motion to include previous complaints against Kane, many of which had been buried or dismissed without review. With the court's permission, 5 citizens testified over the next 2 days. A black teenager stopped and shoved for looking suspicious. A Latina mother handcuffed in front of her children for questioning a parking ticket. A Muslim delivery driver accused of acting nervous and violently searched. Their stories painted a chilling pattern. Kane sat through it all, rigid and silent, his face drained of the arrogance he once carried. The weight of the truth, amplified by public exposure, had finally caught up with him. Then came the testimony that everyone had waited for: Dr. Aisha Monroe. When she took the stand, the room grew still. She didn't need notes or theatrics. Her voice was calm, steady, and full of quiet strength. "I did not provoke Officer Kane," she said. "I didn't speak to him until he confronted me. I asked him to walk away because I knew his behavior was escalating. His aggression was not caused by anything I did. It came from something deeper, something that's been allowed to grow inside our systems unchecked." She looked directly at Kane, then at the jury. "This is not just about me. I was fortunate enough to have the title and support to protect me after the fact. But how many others didn't? How many voices were ignored because they weren't married to a police chief? Because they didn't have it on camera? We cannot allow power to justify abuse. Not in court. Not in our communities." Her words hit with precision. The jury watched her closely, and some even wiped tears from their eyes. She didn't scream. She didn't demand pity. She simply told the truth that by the final day, there was little left for Kane's defense to argue. The verdict came quickly. Guilty on all charges. As he was led away in handcuffs, no longer a man above consequence, the courtroom exhaled. Not with triumph, but with relief. For once, justice had not been delayed. And more importantly, it had not been denied. What happened in that courtroom sent a message far beyond its walls. The system had been forced to listen. And now, change was no longer optional, it was inevitable. Officer Bradley Kane's conviction sent shockwaves not just through the police department, but across the entire city. For years, many believed justice was selective, only accessible to those with power, position, or privilege. But this case proved that even the seemingly untouchable could be held accountable. The assault on Dr. Aisha Monroe had exposed more than one man's violent outburst. It had pulled back the curtain on a culture of unchecked authority, silenced complaints, and systemic negligence. Kane was sentenced to 3 years in prison and permanently stripped of his badge and pension. The judge, during sentencing, made it clear: this court cannot erase the harm done, but it can set an example. This verdict is not revenge, it is responsibility. Public celebrations erupted the evening of the verdict, not with loud parades, but with quiet gatherings, candlelight vigils, and heartfelt speeches. Activists who had fought for years to bring attention to officers like Kane felt vindicated. One local community leader said it best, "We've been shouting into the wind for too long. Tonight, the wind finally turned back in our favor." But the true impact came in the days that followed. Chief Malcolm Monroe announced sweeping reforms within the department. Effective immediately, all officers would undergo quarterly bias training and an independent civilian oversight board long. Resisted by police unions would now have power to review complaints, audit investigations, and make disciplinary recommendations. Officers with repeated citizen complaints would be flagged for mandatory review, and body cam footage would be subject to random audits by third-party legal observers. Most notably, the department would begin implementing a policy that had been stalled for years: community-based hiring, focused on recruiting officers from the very neighborhoods they'd serve. These aren't just reforms. Chief Monroe said it at a press conference. They're reminders that the badge is a responsibility, not a shield. Dr. Aisha Monroe continued to stay out of the spotlight, declining interviews and avoiding public appearances. When asked by a reporter how she felt after the trial, her only response was, relieved, but not satisfied. This is a beginning, not an end. She returned to her civil rights work quietly, but her name became a rallying point for new initiatives, especially one launched in her honor, the Monroe Accountability Fund, aimed at providing legal support to victims of police misconduct who lack the resources to fight back. Meanwhile, the video of Kane's arrest and Aisha's courtroom testimony became required viewing in police training academies across the state. It served not as a warning, but as a standard of what happens when silence is broken, and justice demands action. In the story's final chapter, Malcolm and Aisha walked hand in hand through the courthouse lobby where it had all begun. They weren't flanked by cameras or reporters, just quiet respect from those who recognized them. Their partnership had weathered the worst and stood firm, not only in marriage, but in shared conviction. As they exited through the courthouse doors, the sunlight hit them squarely, and though they didn't speak, their silence echoed something powerful, that the system could change, that truth could prevail, and that justice, finally, had a face.